There's a specific kind of silence that follows a moment where you didn't speak up, and you knew you should have. Not because you lacked the words, not because you didn't understand the room, but because something in you hesitated, measured the risk, held back. And afterward, the thought that stayed with you wasn't, "I was wrong." It was something quieter than that, something harder to name. That's what we're going to examine today. At some point after 40, confidence stops behaving the way it used to. It's not gone. You can feel it. It's still there, underneath. But it no longer moves through you the way it once did. You sit in meetings where you've been the most experienced person in the room for years, and you speak less than you used to. You choose your words more carefully before asserting an opinion. You wait an extra beat. You run the statement through an internal filter before it leaves your mouth. And when someone younger in the room speaks with less information and more certainty, something in you registers the contrast, not as anger, not as envy, just as a quiet, low-grade awareness. You've been in more rooms. You've seen more outcomes. You've made better decisions under more pressure than most people in that building will face in their careers. And yet, the hesitation is real. That's not incompetence. That's not weakness. That's what happens when confidence encounters a system that stopped rewarding the kind you developed. Here's what most people don't realize is happening beneath that hesitation. It's not that you've lost the ability to assert yourself. It's that asserting yourself now carries weight it didn't carry at 30. At 30, what a miscalculation cost you some social friction. You recovered in a week. At 45, a miscalculation lands differently. It affects reputation. It affects relationships you've spent years building. It affects how people read you in rooms you still need to operate in. So the hesitation isn't irrationality. It's actually a sophisticated risk assessment running in the background, faster than conscious thought, every time you consider speaking. The problem is that this system, while intelligent, is also costing you presence. And presence is what confidence actually looks like at this stage. You've been spending more energy managing perception than projecting certainty. And that imbalance between how much you know and how much authority you're allowing yourself to occupy is the actual source of the tension. Again, what quietly changes after 40 is the architecture of confidence itself. For most of your career, confidence was performance adjacent. It showed up as energy, volume, the ability to dominate a narrative, to take up space. That model of confidence is optimized for early career visibility. It's built for people who need to be noticed before they're known. But you're known. That changes everything about what confidence is supposed to do. At this stage, confidence isn't about announcing your value. It's about operating from it, quietly, consistently, without requiring external confirmation every time you do. The shift is from performance to calibration. And most people who grew up with the performance model don't make that transition naturally. Not because they can't, but because no one told them it was necessary. You don't lack confidence. You're running an older version of it. Let's get precise about what dangerous confidence actually looks like after 40. Because the word dangerous here doesn't mean aggressive. It doesn't mean dominant. It doesn't mean taking up more space than necessary. Dangerous confidence at this stage looks like low emotional reactivity combined with high internal certainty. It's the ability to hold your position without needing the room to validate it, to express a view without over-explaining it, to disagree without a performance of disagreement. Here's what most people miss. Arrogance and confidence get confused because both can look like certainty from the outside. But arrogance is insecurity that needs the room to agree. It pushes, it escalates, it gets louder when challenged. Confidence at maturity doesn't escalate, it stays even. Yet it doesn't need to win the moment. It's operating from a longer timeline than the moment. That's what makes it register differently. And here's the status preservation piece that matters. The most quietly authoritative people in any room after 40 are not the ones speaking most often. They're the ones whose words land heavier when they do. You've been equating volume with authority for a long time. That equation worked once. It's working less now. Not because the room changed, but because your weight changed. Experience is leverage, not nostalgia, not a credential to display. Actual structural leverage in how you see problems that others don't yet see. The question is whether you're using it that way. After 40, confidence starts operating through pattern recognition. You've watched enough cycles complete, seen enough early certainty expose itself as premature, survived enough seasons of instability that younger colleagues haven't navigated yet. That's not age, that's compression. Years of information compressed into intuition. The calmness that comes from that depth doesn't read as disengagement. It reads as authority to anyone paying attention. And here's the reframe that matters. You no longer need to compete for credibility in most rooms. You need to position within them. Competition is about proving something. Positioning is about occupying your actual value. Competition is exhausting because the goalposts move. Every time you win the room, someone new enters, and the work begins again. Positioning is stable. It's built on a foundation that doesn't require reconstruction every time the audience changes. Yet this is what calm authority actually is. Not the absence of intensity, but the presence of a settled internal reference point that external pressure doesn't easily relocate. What makes this harder to execute than it sounds is that confidence at 40 doesn't operate in a vacuum. You have obligations, financial structures built over years, people who depend on the stability of your judgment, a reputation that took a long time to accumulate and can be read in 1,000 small moments every day. Risk doesn't feel the same as it did at 28, not because you've lost nerve, but because the stakes of miscalculation are distributed differently now. They land on people you're responsible for. They affect systems you've spent years building. That context doesn't make you timid. It makes you calibrated. But here's where the problem compounds. When you bring calibrated hesitation into spaces that still reward performed certainty, you can appear less authoritative than you are. Not because you are, but because you're playing by a different set of rules than the room expects, and you haven't yet made that explicit. Confidence that operates within constraint is actually more sophisticated than confidence that doesn't have to. That distinction matters, and it's one most frameworks for this topic miss entirely. Here's what this has been building toward. Dangerous confidence after 40, the kind that reads as authority without arrogance, is not about doing more. It's not about presenting differently. It's not about finding the right room or the right language. Yet it's about developing self-trust that doesn't require audience reaction to remain intact. That phrase is worth sitting with. Most of what we call confidence earlier in life is actually responsiveness to recognition, to approval, to the visible reaction of people whose opinion we've decided matters. We feel confident when the room confirms us. That's not confidence. That's a feedback loop. And feedback loops are only as stable as the signal coming in. After 40, the signal becomes less reliable. Rooms change. Hierarchies shift. The colleagues who used to validate your presence move on, or retire, or the organizational structure reorganizes around newer priorities. If your confidence is still located inside that loop, it will keep fluctuating with conditions outside your control. Dangerous confidence is the shift out of that loop entirely. Yet it's the ability to carry internal certainty about the accuracy of your judgment, independent of who's confirming it in any given moment. Not arrogance. Arrogance defends against doubt. This is different. This is the absence of the need to defend, because the internal reference point is stable enough that external pressure doesn't trigger a reorganization. The people you've encountered in your career who seemed effortlessly authoritative, who didn't need to prove themselves, didn't seem rattled by challenge, didn't perform when they spoke, were not operating on personality. They were operating on this. They had located confidence somewhere external pressure couldn't easily reach. You are not late to this. You are, in fact, and at exactly the life stage where this kind of confidence becomes possible, because it requires everything that comes before it. The mistakes, the recoveries, the years of watching what works and what collapses under pressure. Midlife is not decline. It is compression. Less time, yes, but sharper self-knowledge, clearer values, fewer illusions about what actually matters. That compression, when you stop resisting it, becomes a form of precision. The most confident version of you after 40 is not louder than you are now. It's not more assertive in the conventional sense. It doesn't require a new wardrobe, a redefined personal brand, or a strategic reinvention. It requires one structural shift. Moving the location of your confidence from outside to inside, from the room's reaction to your own judgment, yet from their confirmation to your own read of the situation. That shift is not an event. It's a practice, and it begins not with a decision to change, but with a recognition. The recognition that what you've been calling self-doubt is often something more precise than that. It's the gap between what you actually know and how much authority you've been willing to occupy. Close that gap, not with force, not with performance, but with the quiet, accumulated decision to trust your own read. Authority is internal alignment under pressure. That's not a strategy. That's a description of what you're already capable of when you stop waiting for the room to confirm it.